So welcome. You all having fun? Yeah. Woo! Come on. Yeah! So today we're going to talk about securing Windows with group policy. This is me. That's actually me a long time ago. I've been in IT for about 7 years. I have a couple of certs, whatever, doesn't really matter. But my focus has been Windows security, digital forensics, and PowerShell, and lately Python automation. So I used to work for the University of Missouri doing digital forensics and IT security. And I had a lot of experience deploying software before that in different organizations. So that kind of gives you a little background. If you want to ask more, I'll tell you, but it's boring. Who here uses group policy? Okay. I guess I should have asked a different question. Who here uses group policy every week? All right. Once a month? Once a year? Okay. Anyone know this acronym? LSDOU. It's not the drug. So in group policy, I'm just going to touch a little bit about the actual ordering and processing of how it actually works so we can get a little baseline before we dive into the weeds. But LSDOU stands for Local System Domain, Local Site Domain OU. And they're just different layers across your domain and your infrastructure. First, we'll take a look at local. It's chaos, right? This is your local system, local security, or local group policy you see on Windows 7, Windows XP, Service Pack 3, and, Windows 10. And it's just, you got unicorns and pterodactyls everywhere. It's just like complete chaos, right? You don't typically want to manage every single computer individually, right? You don't want to go up to it and configure it here and then go over and configure it here. But it is the first order of processing. What I mean by that is that it is all, well, just like every other group policy out there, it's machine and user specific. It's just free for all, and it's unmanaged. You're not going to be able to maintain it in the long run. Site. Anybody actually use sites in their AD force? Okay, cool. I've actually never come across that, but I know what it is. Site in this kind of example is really a geographic location or a network segmentation. You can have certain /16s or whatever it is in your network that's usually organized. And in this analogy, and these analogies I'll go forward, I consider that if you look at the global scope of the world, each country is considered kind of a site, right? It's based on boundaries, laws, everything else. So a site-based group policy is useful, but it really kind of makes up of multiple, domain controllers in that site or that location. So if you're globally distributed, you're probably, have different sites for United States, for Europe, for, China, wherever it is, you're going to have different sites. Again, I don't see this a lot, but if you do have experience, it's really just to apply a group policy across your multiple different zones in your organization. Domain. So if we take the scope of a single site kind of out of the equation here, we actually have individual sites or domains within a country. Let's just say for the US, each individual 50 state is an actual domain that we have. And we apply site-based domains or policies, across that impact all of those organizations or all those domains, right? In that site. So a domain, I consider that like a federal law. You can't kill people, you got to pay taxes, you should vote, you have the right to vote, right to bear arms, whatever it is, those are federal, laws that we have. But each individual domain actually has its own laws, right? And so group policy can actually apply at that entire federal level or your site level across all your domains in your Active Directory force. Or you can actually apply different default domain policies for each state or domain in your organization. Missouri, I'm from here, born and raised, not St. Louis, but in Missouri. But we have different state laws, right? Certain tax rates. I don't know of any specific ones, but we have different state laws in our environment that we have to abide by. And those can be considered that default domain policy or the default domain controller policy that you have in those domains. You can also apply different group policy objects into individual OUs, and those OUs can be layered as deep as you want, depending on your organization. So I can actually apply a group policy at that domain, and it's going to affect everything underneath it. So if we look at our example of counties, like Boone County, I live in Columbia, Missouri. So we have different county laws that we have to abide by, and they only apply to everything underneath us. Nothing outside. My Boone County laws is not going to impact St. Louis County, unless they have the similar law. But any users or computers or objects in that realm of that county or that organizational unit, all those rules apply. There are exceptions, like loopback processing mode and blocking inheritance and all these other things that we won't go into. But for the basis of how group policy works, you can apply it at a federal level, you can apply it at your domain level, and then you can apply it to each individual organizational unit, and it's only going to affect objects or devices in that container. Who here actually has a homeowner's policy or association that they're a part of, right? You pay, I don't know, $200 and there's a lot of rules. I don't have one, but your hedges have to be so high. You can't park on the street. You can't put a trash in the front yard. Whatever it is. But those policies only affect your street or your neighborhood or your department. So we can break down OUs or organizational units all the way down to the littlest possible object if you choose to. But everything underneath there will actually, it'll only affect and apply to those devices in that container or that structure. We can even go down to our house. I have rules in my house. I don't want, maybe I don't want kids to get on my Wi-Fi after 9 o'clock. I can block that. So we can apply a group policy all the way down to this level, even going further to individual rooms. Like I had roommates when I was younger that a bunch of guys lived in a house, and we put the lock on the refrigerator because I didn't want anyone else to eat all my food. So you can actually apply those individual rules all the way down to to an individual level or to a specific person or object in that organizational unit. All right. So group policy is really a hierarchical structure that you can actually have computers, user objects, that you can apply laws from any scope, but everything underneath it will apply or impact it. There are some, again, exceptions, like a password policy can only be applied once across your domains. There's like 13 magic ones that can only be applied once, no matter where they're at. But you also have to think of, okay, this object is in this location, then all of these policies are actually going to impact it, but they impact it in a specific order. When you're thinking of an object, the first one that gets applied in the group policy ordering is going to be the last to impact it. So it's always going to be the last one to apply that's going to trump everything else in your policy, except for those magic 13. Just a little overview of how LSD and group policy typically works. So managing users. Let's get to the fun stuff. So managing users is fun, right? We all have fun at it, right? We love our users. Anyone here recognize any of these accounts? All right. Domain administrators, domain controller schema admins, print operators, whatever they are, these are individual accounts or groups that need to be managed. They cannot just be floating out there individually. And you can restrict rights and you can restrict permissions to each individual one of these. Yes, may seem like a lot of work, but you need to protect any of the ones that you really see here. Domain admins, especially enterprise admins, schema admins, server operators, even local administrators you can protect. Anyone ever go to a rallies? I've never been to a rallies, but I guess they have Wi-Fi, right? So with group policy, you can actually manage very specific user actions or user capabilities with group policy objects. You can tell who can connect to what Wi-Fi, what can they do, what can they talk to, and what devices they can actually log into. It's great, isn't it? I love that. Anyone ever heard of restricted groups? All right. So you should be using these restricted groups. Let me tell you. One of the biggest things, imagine this scenario. You have an attacker that has, you have an IT admin that is a domain admin or has privilege level accounts in their organization. And you can actually, let's say you go and corrupt a user's machine. And that machine so happens to just install a little piece of shell script in there that will basically reuse let's say that they get compromised and Betty that's sitting there says, "Hey, IT guy, come over here. Okay, something's weird going on with my computer," right? What? Okay. So you go over there and you start typing in your admin credentials and you log in but you don't know that they actually set up a login script for that profile and now just created a brand new account that can be put right into domain admins or whatever privilege account they want. Pretty easy. You use the old DCACL tools. You can use custom scripts, whatever you want, VB scripts, but you can actually create different users and inject them into those specific accounts. That person logging in or that IT administrator logging in will never know. So with restricted groups, every time group policy refreshes, it'll actually kick that user out completely. And it's always going to be static. So right now you can see that we have administrator in another account called MS administrator. And someone just did that login script and injected malicious user in there. Do you have logging, alerting set up? Probably most don't. Some do, which is great if you do. But most people probably don't have that. And now you have an initial malicious user that has full access to your entire domain by just having a little logon script that they had access to a computer. So with restricted groups, the next time it actually refreshes, it will just repopulate that group with the original members and kick everyone else out completely. Simple, pretty easy. You can do this to all your groups or all your security groups in your organization. Might be tedious depending on how big they are. But for the high privilege ones, domain admins, schema admins, all the other accounts that I mentioned, you just add specific users or specific accounts into that group and then lock that group policy down so it can't be edited and it can't be modified only by a specific additional account that has no other privileges except for to modify that. And keep that password very, very long. Never use it. So with this restricted groups, it's just one little example of how you can manage user rights and protect those highly sensitive accounts in your organization. I don't dab. I'm too old for that. But I thought it was an awesome picture. You know, we have users, so we talked about managing users. Now let's talk about actual managing user rights. When I've only bought 2 homes, one, and not at the same time. Like I don't own 2 homes. I'm saying I bought 2 different homes. But the first thing that I do when I log in or when I buy that house, I change the locks. I don't care if the owner just told me that they put brand new locks. I'm going to replace my locks. Who else does that? Yeah, seems sensible. You just don't want another person to come in later that evening while your stuff's moving in and just, oh, I forgot something, and take all your crap. So you need to actually, protect those accounts. Why, if you did that for your house, do you do the same thing for your Windows operating systems? Meaning, do you just install the base image and no configuration and no nothing? You shouldn't. You're automatically trusting that Microsoft has configured Windows to actually be secure, and they haven't. We all know that. We see that weekly. So when you need to actually go in there and manage those individual user rights or individual groups in that operating system. These are some highly privileged accounts that we'll talk about. Act as part of the operating system. So, as a user, when would a user need to act as part of the operating system? Like, they're saying, I'm going to log in and I need to do something, but I'm just going to act like I'm the OS. Most users don't, at all. So, you need to get them out of these privileges completely. And you can do this all through group policy, through the local user rights assignments. Create a token object. Anybody know what a token object is? A security access token? All right, we'll talk about that on the next slide. Debug programs. So this is like the danger zone. Almost, I don't have any concrete numbers, but a lot of the malware that I see uses this privilege, and they specifically look for this privilege. The only people that need to debug are your developers, or maybe an IT person. Most users do not want to run an Outlook and debug it. Like, why would you ever need to do that? You don't. By default, all of these permissions that you see here are on local or in an administrative group on your machine. Period. So, there's also other accounts, like print operators that have some of these permissions, or even local service, or network service, or any of these other accounts actually have these privileges. So, impersonate a client after the authentication, restore file, take ownership. Most users do not need to have these permissions at all. We can remove them. Impersonate a client privilege. So a SAT is a security access token, and it's used and it's a string that allows you and tells you what you have access to and what you can read, write, execute, not deny rights to. And so with this privilege, they can actually use that security access token across your network. So if an IT admin logs in, they can again grab that SAT, and now they can log into other machines or grab other permissions and access things that IT admin can access. So by default, even if they are logging on as a local user on that account or on that computer, you need to remove it from admins and ask if they need that, then apply a specific policy to that machine. Restrict it as much as possible. A lot of them, they do the token stealing, and they'll use it for network authentication. So at the bottom, it's kind of a little cut off, so I apologize for that, but these are the actual Win API classes that are used when using this privilege. So SE impersonate privilege, SE create global privilege. All right. Security access tokens. It's really like the GUI ID that you see. It's like a big string, and it has the actual user ID, what groups they belong to, what privileges they have access to, and other information. But it's really all made up of these ACEs, the access. I have to look at the name. There's so many acronyms here, so I apologize. DACLs, they're discrete access control lists, or these ACEs, which are even lower level. But It's really all about a security descriptor that you could actually use to authenticate to a specific service or log in and do a certain action. By restricting the ability to actually impersonate these security access tokens, we reduce our footprint quite a bit in our organization. Here's an example. It's a little tool. It's free, 100%. I downloaded it, created this GIF, Jeff, whatever you want to call it, in like 5 minutes. And it's called incognito.exe, and I just say, all right, I want to list all my security access tokens. There you go. Done. It's pretty straightforward. There's a lot of tools out here that can actually take that token and use it to authenticate RDP or SSH, whatever you want across your network. And it's pretty dang easy to do. Debug programs. I'm going to open this. Might be loud, so I apologize. Debug programs privilege. Anyone actually block debug from their environment? All right. So what it allows you to do is have access to the kernel as a user. Why? Why Microsoft? Why? You should never have access to kernel level memory, the operating system's level memory in your as a normal user. Like I understand it for developers. I understand it for specific programs may use this, but those are bad programs and you shouldn't use them. But you can inject a thread into any process, and you can actually import DLLs, crack hashes, whatever, because you can actually access specific portions of memory that are supposed to be protected. And now you have complete access to most kernel level memory locations. So this is actually a story by, I believe it was Carbon Black, Petia. Anyone ever heard of that? It was a big news about a year ago now. But they actually had this, malware logic chain that they went through, this big white paper, and this is just one example. There's hundreds of them out there, but the first thing that malware does, check for SE shutdown. So can the user restart their computer? I don't even know why for that, but I'm sure there's a reason. But then they say, okay, can they debug? It's like the first thing that they check, that's really, really dangerous. If you remove that, then that malware has to go a more difficult route, 100%. And almost 90, again, I have not seen, in my experience, I haven't seen a lot of malware that hasn't checked for SE debug. I'm sure there's some out there. I'm sure it's out there, but having that ability as well as taking ownership of a process. Again, you're acting as part of the operating system, or you're owning that process. So if you can remove those two permissions, you're probably going to stop a lot of direct attacks in your organization just by removing those two permissions that we showed earlier. High noon. Come on, these are funny. I thought they were funny. So logon rights. Anybody use any of these in their organization? Yeah? Like, should I, as any normal user, be able to RDP in any computer in your organization? Any server? Anything? Yeah, you may have network segmentation, Good, I hope, please. VLANs, whatever you want to use out there. But you should specifically deny certain privileges that people should do and only allow certain users to do their specific action. So deny as a service. Don't log. Why would someone need to deny or to log on as a service? Yeah, there's certain accounts, right? Maybe SCCM is one. There's other ones that are service accounts that are in your AD that they may have to, log in, but that's one specific thing, not everyone. Like, I can use your token and log in as an IT admin's token and log in as a service, it's dangerous. Really, really dangerous. But you also want to, deny RDP, and only allow certain people that need access. Not just kind of blanket, because if they're any sort of administrator or in the remote desktop users group on their local machine, they now can change those settings. Even though they may not be admins, they still may have those rights. So again, this is under the user rights assignment. There's, I can't even remember, like 50 or so different sorts of rights. And Microsoft's been really awesome. But I'm sure you probably read these explanation tabs or whatever. They're very literal with every word in that explanation. And if you don't find enough information, Google is your best friend. There's tons of information on how to use these. But for allow logon, you can specify a computer and a user that can log into that object. So apply it at whatever level you want. If you have your HR department, if you have your finance department, and only specific computers should access, apply it only at that OU. You don't have to apply it across your entire domain. You just apply it to whatever objects are in that structure that you want it to apply to. Again, the local user groups. Anyone recognize any of those? No hands? Oh my God. Remote desktop users. Again, these are all local accounts on your operating system by default. You can replace, even though you're an administrator, a local administrator on your machine, you can actually go in and say, okay, but I'm going to remove local administrator from remote desktop users. So you're still an admin, technically, but you can't RDP, you can't use network privileges. You can't distributed comm users. There's a whole bunch out there, but so you can restrict those even local admins down to absolutely what they need to do. Anyone ever use this local users and groups? Well, just like control panel settings in general. These, yeah. So in the action field, there's update, create, delete, and replace, I believe, that you can do with all of those local groups on your entire workstation. So you don't have to manage individual local groups or individual computers outside of group policy. You can actually use your AD group policy to manage those user accounts. Chuckle, yes. It says task scheduler. Yeah, and the guy's I'm just repeating 84 times until he is bloody. So, let's say you have your house, right? You do have your house, and we've applied group policies. Who here has like home automation of any sort? Like, security cameras, temperature, any IoT device out there. So, I'm not saying group policy can manage IoT devices. That is not where I'm going. But you have those individual rules, but you want to protect as much as possible. And you have repeatable tasks that you always do. For me, I say, okay, my temperature at night, I want it to go down to 70 degrees, and during the day, go up to 75. Those are repeatable tasks, right? Use the task scheduler in group policy because it is amazing, and I'll show you why. You all recognize these at all? These are privileges that tasks or the task scheduler can run as. And the very top is what you want to try to use. Local service. You can run scheduled tasks without a password, without remembering any credentials, without storing anything, all by using these already built-in service accounts that are on that workstation. So when you use local service, you still have administrative rights, but you have a lot less administrative rights. If you need to use it to pull down a script or do something with the network, use network service. Never never, please God, never use domain user, local system, or anything else below there. Because that is very easy to steal and very easy to reuse those security access tokens to redirect and go into that to another computer and do the same damn thing. Really, really dangerous. If you need to, you can use a local user account, but please, these other ones don't require any passwords as long as you use them through group policy. Well, and some scripting. But. Anyone ever used an immediate scheduled task? This is the coolness, I think. An immediate scheduled task is unique. It's like a regular scheduled task, but you can actually apply it across your machines and do it immediately and once. So you can actually, if you just want to run a PowerShell script, right? You can do PowerShell remoting, great. I wouldn't recommend it, but you can do it. Because there are those tokens, unless you have SSL and you have certificates on all your machines, there's a lot of other caveats there, but immediate scheduled task allows you to run any scheduled task almost immediately across all of your machines with very, very, almost no risk at all. So here's an immediate scheduled task. You can find it in that control panel settings. You can run PowerShell.exe to run another script or to go out to your network path or whatever it is to grab individual commands or scripts or supporting things that you need. Just make sure they have access, to them. But again, you're using the NT Authority local service. You have the run whether logged in and run with the highest privileges. Blood proud. Secure code execution. So the reason why this is so critical is you can run, again, whether the user is logged in, you don't store a password, and you can run with highest privileges. But that security access token that we have been talking about, automatically with this magic that Microsoft has created, there's very little documentation, but it doesn't store a security access token. It cannot be impersonated, and it cannot be used against you. It just doesn't exist. So it can only run once, and it can only run on that computer, and it is immediate, and then it goes away. And you never have to worry about cleanup or anything else with immediate scheduled task. So it's highly privileged, but it allows quick access to that actual, running of a script real quick across your other machines to get inventory, to do whatever you want, but using a highly sensitive, using group policy to kind of protect you in the meantime. Jeez. Unity, managing services. So, does anyone turn off any, Windows services? Even on your servers or your workstations or anything? One person. You're two. Awesome. Great job. Jeez. Great. It's the Illuminati. These services are, with group policy, we can do a lot. We can manage almost every aspect of your entire organization or your objects, your users, your computers through group policy. Really hard to read because it's so long. These are the default services on a Windows Server 2016. About 70% of them are running. But, some of them are just off or waiting to, kick on. Some of them are turned off manual. You have to manually start them. But it's still a huge list of services that are just sitting on a normal server. If you have a web server, IIS web server, what do you need some of these? Task scheduler service. Maybe there's a reason there. IP helper, link layer topology discovery mapper. Any of these that are vulnerable on that web server and you don't get in time and patch, they're vulnerable because those services are open, right? And they're running. By just disabling them, maybe you can't get to patching, every 30 days or whatever it is. Please patch. I'm not saying don't patch. Please patch. But you can reduce your footprint by just eliminating the services you do not need at all. For a typical IIS server base, I'm not saying this is at the minimum. These are the services that need to be enabled to run. Out of all those other ones that you saw, you don't need them at all. You need to be able to have a Windows installer, remote, RPC service, whatever it is, by default. And so if you don't configure your operating system, harden them, kind of protect them. Yes, it may be a little bit more work, but once you have a template, a group policy template, just reuse it. Like it's not. If you have a pool of IIS servers or certain server types, that just create group policies for those individual OUs or wherever they're sitting in Active Directory. Again, you can turn them off, all of them. You can disable. You can actually edit security permissions and a whole bunch of other stuff here, but all of them are depending on your domain level, depending on what your function level of your domain is. You can actually go through and manage individual services. You can also do this on your workstations. There's some on there that I'm trying to think. Message queuing. It's not like queuing as in like AWS SQS stuff, but it is a queue system. But most people are not using this. Like, why would your workstation ever need that on? It's just another attack point that allows code to run. Plug and play. I mean, I understand because of that, because of USB drives, but also with group policy, we'll go on that tangent. With group policy, you can block USB devices based on IDs and driver types, all through group policy. If you want to know more about that, come up afterwards and we can chat. Oh, I thought I had like some potty. Stupefy, iTunes. Yeah, anyways. Process mitigation. So, anyone heard of Emmet? Remember, it was a few years ago. It was a pretty cool tool that Microsoft released that you could deploy on your endpoints and configure it and do all that stuff. It was pretty cool. In Windows Server 2016, domain function level, you now have the ability for process mitigation. What that means that you can control individual processes or threads with DEP, CHOP, and ASLR. So to kind of explain that a little bit deeper, DEP is data execution prevention. You are protecting certain types of memory from a process using that type of memory. That they shouldn't be, malware should not be able to inject or access certain blocks of memory that the operating system is using. Rootkits, everything. It's just a built-in protection that since Windows 7 or 8, it's been there. But you can actually specify it for a specific process or application now. CHOP, Structured Exception. I love these acronyms. Structured Exception Handler Overwrite Protection. So this is like basically the SEH is used in C++ and it's used in other languages to actually go through and cause an exception. If you don't handle that, it's kind of like a buffer overflow. Similar, it's like a stack overflow, not the website. But it's just bad error handling in code, really. But people can use that to actually put malicious content into memory, and this basically handles those so they can't be used maliciously. ASLR, Windows XP was when it booted, rootkits loved it back then. They loved it because every time Windows booted, the DLLs and all the things that it needed to, start the operating system would always be the same place in memory, like always. So once you figure that out, like you're golden. Like you can inject, you can replace, services.exe with your own services.exe, and you're off to the races. And they're not probably going to detect it. Windows 7 started to get a little bit better with this. And then Windows 10, it was randomized, basically. And then Windows 10, it's completely randomized. They protected it. The reason I say that is that you can actually specify that for individual, again, applications like IE, like your Outlook, like whatever application that you have, you can actually do randomization from top down, bottom down. There's a whole bunch of very specific privileges that are settings that you can do per process. It's kind of funky, though. It's not nice yet. It will be. This is really cool. So for Internet Explorer, it's those question marks. And then like some of them are ones and some of them are zeros. They have documentation, luckily. Well, it's like a blog by some TechNet writer. But I made this kind of cheat sheet, and I can share it out if anyone's interested. But those question marks basically mean don't change, just leave it as it is. And then you can actually flip depending on what you're actually wanting. So process creation, mitigation for ASLR from bottom up or top down or whatever you want. Again, this is getting into more, I don't know how many people actually use process mitigation, but it's really, really cool technology that they've now embedded into the operating system. Scripting! Yay! So here are scripts. It can be anything. Bash, VB, please no. PowerShell, right? Woo! PowerShell. I love it. I write a lot of stuff when I have free time, when my wife isn't asking me to mow the lawn or whatever else it is. But you can do a lot with scripting. But with PowerShell, you can do a lot to protect yourself, right? So there's a bunch of different settings, and they're all down there at the bottom, but you need to enable them all. Does anyone log their workstations and forward them off to some Splunk or, some SIM? Like 3, okay. Try to do that. It's really, it's really beneficial, if you can. I know it's expensive depending on, how large your environment is. I had, 40,000 endpoints, and yeah, it was almost impossible because there was so much logging going on. But if you can enable the logging, at least do, turn on module or script execution and transcription. So that will literally, everything you put into PowerShell, a script runs, whatever it is, we'll log it and put it into a log file. Then restrict writes to that log. So I, or a malicious user, or just a normal user, can't just delete all your log files, and now all the evidence is gone, and you're kind of screwed. But anyone also, lock down your IPs. So that's another setting I wanted to point out, that PowerShell can do remoting, but you need to make sure that only certain like IP addresses, you may or may not have static IPs, just depending on your organization, but you should lock down who can do remoting and who not. You don't want just a normal user to be able to, don't put star in there, because there's a bunch of settings. Just don't do star. You can digitally sign your scripts, which is really actually pretty powerful when we go into the next slide, next slides, but I'll explain. And then use immediate scheduled task. Again, anyone know the difference between interactive and non-interactive logins? So an interactive login is remote desktop, right? You have a GUI and you log into the computer, and so is PowerShell remoting as well. Certain cases, not saying all. There's a difference between using WMI versus what's the other? I'm going to draw a blank, but there are differences. Also, JEA. Just enough administration. This is actually really, really, really cool. It's a new thing from Microsoft that, imagine you have help desk that needs to, you just want somebody to restart your print spoolers when, something goes crazy, right? But to do that, they have to use the PowerShell commands, on your print server, or whatever it is, and they need admin access to do that. Well, with JEA, I can actually specify a specific file that says, yes, you have admin, but you only have admin to run these 4 PowerShell commands, and that's it. Nothing else. And when they log in, it creates what they call a virtual account. So it's like a fake account. That when you say, okay, I see user X, they have, we've been authorized to add them to this list. They log in, creates this magic virtual account. They do their thing, they log off, it disappears and goes away. But you can give admin to specific .NET or PowerShell commands through just enough administration. It's pretty neat. And App Locker. Anyone use App Locker? Want to? Heard of it? Heard of it, right? So what it's all about is constrained language mode. So constrained language, there's 3 different language modes for PowerShell to run. And this isn't like the, English language or Chinese language, whatever it is. This is like the language of .NET and what it has access to. So you can actually restrict PowerShell from running on your machine 100%. By using both this PS lockdown policy as well, there's actually a group policy for it. I just did this one because it actually shows what's happening instead of the other one. But use that with AppLocker, you can actually restrict PowerShell running in your environment completely. Yeah, there's maybe some problems, just depending, but you have to test it out, just like everything else. But you have the ability to actually change the language. There's constrained language mode. There's do I have notes on it? No. All right. There's 3 different loads. So if you actually go into your computer in an environmental variable and just on practice for Windows, because this is really easy to remove, just add __ PS lockdown policy and set the value to 4. If you do that, right click on PowerShell, console, whatever you want, and try to run it, you will see red everywhere, and it won't run. PowerShell does not run. But since by doing this, it's really easy to change an environmental variable. That's where AppLocker comes in, where it forces that. And so you can't override it as a user or as a malicious actor or anything. But it's all about what constrained language mode you want. That's the Illuminati. AppLocker, yeah. So I'll try to run through this here. But AppLocker is not scary, for the most part. It sounds scary, but it's actually really, really beneficial to your incident response teams, your security teams. Even if you don't apply it and you use just audit-only mode. So you can do 2 different things. You can do audit and you can say, okay, I want an allow or a block rule, or I want this to actually work. So with audit, you actually just, it says, okay, this application or this process would have passed, would have been blocked, or would have been allowed based on your current configuration. So you can adjust it as you go. And it's just an audit log. Like nothing actually happens. It's telling you what may happen if you actually enabled it in your organization or across your machines. So it's really, really beneficial, even for just that alone, because now you know, like, every process running on all of your machines, and you have a huge log, and it's all nice and pretty, and you can export it out and do a lot of cool stuff with it. Even just an audit mode. But I recommend actually, enabling it at some point. But I know it's going to take time, right? But there are those 3 different conditions or rules we'll talk about. Hash condition, path condition, and publisher. So the hash condition, boop, it is really like so you can apply AppLocker across all your, binaries, DLLs, but I hate, it's good for some things, but I don't like it. because that means every time that Outlook updates, anything updates, that hash is going to change. And so you say, okay, I'm going to block or allow Microsoft or, you know, certain EXEs. Anytime you make a change, it's going to change. So unless you have a specific application that will never get updated and never change, that's the only reason I would use hash condition. Path condition. This is actually pretty cool. A lot of people use this. But you can actually, you know, select an entire suite of products, like it says, Microsoft, whatever folder that you want. But depending on what application and what paths are there, if it's program files or, you know, somewhere Windows system, then, you know, you can restrict it pretty easily and you know what paths or people have access to. But, you know, AppLock, when you start getting into app data, it gets a little funky because, example, we had an EXE, but we said, hey, block EXEs, and then someone downloaded like WebEx, and WebEx stores their EXEs in that path, and it was like, all the WebExes stopped working, and it was like, yeah, roll it back, let's go fix it. So be very careful. That's, again, where the audit logging comes in. So you can use that, gather it for 6 months, a year, whatever it takes, but it allows you to know what software is out there in your organization and what's being used. Publisher condition. This is actually pretty cool too. You can just say, okay, Microsoft, but you know, it only works for things that are digitally signed. So if you have software that you modified or that's, you know, in-house built that isn't digitally signed, then you're not going to be able to use this. But for Microsoft, you can say there's ways around this though. There's been research by quite a few people lately of, you know, how to fake those publishers and the certificate chaining, but for the most part, it's pretty good. Also, so, you know, group policy is pretty powerful. You know, it is across your organization. It is free. It's already there. And if you don't know, like group policy is really an enterprise scale registry editor. Everything that you can do in the registry, you can do in group policy. Even manually, if there's not a policy for it, you can actually just add a registry key or remove or drop a file or anything that you can control through your operating system, through group policy. But I wanted to point out that there's a lot of research. This one is actually by the DoD. They actually have a secure host baseline group policy templates that talk about a lot of the stuff that I mentioned and a ton more. Like how to lock down IE, how to lock down Chrome, how to lock down Firefox, whatever it is, they have a huge list of group policy. And then there's just Google, group policy templates, security. There's tons of them out there. So, all right, so this is a sad note. I don't know if you heard. Oh my God. No, so anyone hear about this, right? MS Paint? Yeah, so it died. I know it's back on the App Store, you know, the people were, you know, hate mail was going, so, yeah, but it's a sad day. Sad day. It's been a long time. This is, but contact information. I follow me on Twitter, reach out to me. I'm always around. Try to answer questions as much as possible, but, thank you.